On this week's NFV SDN Reality Check, we're talking with Stratus Technologies to look at how vendors are using virtualization technologies to meet carrier network service levels.
Nexius, accelerating network and business transformation.
Telecom Careers, the #1 global telecom and wireless job board. telecomcareers.com.
Hello, welcome to this week's NFV SDN Reality Check. I'm your host, Dan Meyer, Editor-in-Chief of RCR Wireless News. Thanks for watching us today. Today, we are joined by Jason Anderson, who's the VP of Business Line Management at Stratus Technologies, to talk a bit about the use of virtualization from vendors as they work with their carrier partners. Hey, Jason, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Oh, hey, thanks for having me. It's a lovely day here in Massachusetts. So
it's always nice. As long as it's not snowing there, you guys are in good shape.
So. Yeah, that's pretty much the rule. Yep, absolutely.
Very nice, very nice. Hey, again, thanks for joining us. So yeah, well, maybe we start off with a little bit. Maybe for those who don't know much about Stratus, maybe you want to give us a quick intro on the company, kind of what you guys do, how you guys operate in the telecom space.
Sure, absolutely. So Stratus is let's see, we've been around for 35 years now, and our history primarily has been around building mission critical solutions for applications, right? So that could be generally our history has been in building hardware specific types of things. We were in the mainframe business back in the 80s, and then we kind of got onto Intel platforms in the last 20 years or so. Last 10 has been in software. So people will, different types of companies will call us up and want to build out a solution that is fault tolerant or will not fail. And we essentially build on top of that. So a lot of our history goes in telco was way back to the very beginning, where carrier line switching type of operations or different types of aspects of different OSS, BSS architectures, things like that actually ride on top of Stratus hardware. In fact, we have a lot of those solutions in the market today. But in the last 2 years, we've really focused on building out towards NFV environments. And been working on some pretty significant efforts with some major operators on that now.
Gotcha. Okay, sounds good. Well, yeah, obviously, again, that's something we focus on a lot here. And obviously, you guys have been doing a lot of work in terms of software and virtualization. So I guess as you look at kind of the overall market today, I mean, what impact are you seeing from this move towards NFV and SDN and cloud by telecom and mobile operators on how you're working with them and with your own products? How you guys seen, I guess, the changes in that environment?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. The overall aspect of it is that there's no area where the kind of mismatch between what telcos need, it's still very much at the ideation kind of where are we going next standpoint. And so I think you're dealing with some visionary people out there, and there's some good things going on. But the challenge is that overall they're trying to use commodity stuff. And carrier grade equipment is anything but commoditized. So we really have to find unique ways to inject the carrier grade capability into existing commodity equipment, software, virtualization, hypervisors, things like that. And that's what's starting to happen is when you get into the POCs and you talk to people, there's kind of this almost set of phases where, hey, we've got this great idea, and then it moves into, all right, what the heck are we really going to do? Let's try some stuff, and then they try some stuff, and they begin to recede back into reality and figure out what they can really do. So, it's kind of a lot like some other experiences I had in enterprise, like in middleware and things like that, where at the beginning it was all like, oh, this is going to be great, everything's going to be webified. They kind of shrank right back to, let's start out with something pragmatic. And that's actually been refreshing, because the truth is that I think if you don't do it that way, if somebody were to kind of go whole hog with the state of the art technology today, they're going to get burned in 2 or 3 years, because it's going to change. It's going to be a ton of turn.
Yeah. I mean, I was just asking, is that kind of where we are in this phase? Because again, it did seem like, 2014 was a big hype year for NFV. I mean, you couldn't turn the corner without a new POC or a new platform or a new organization announcing some sort of NFV initiative. Has 2015 so far been maybe a more like a leveling or reasoning phase, really, where people are kind of realizing, okay, obviously there are great opportunities here, but obviously telecom networks are a different bird than data centers, for instance, and so there's maybe a little more reality kind of setting into the kind of the market at this point. Do you think, or is that still a lot of hype?
Yeah, I think what happened is that I agree with that. I think what really happened is last year, it was 2014 was, we're going to do a POC and it's going to be great. And then, then we're going to do a trial. And what happened was either they realized that the POC they didn't learn enough, or they're still doing the same POC and it's stretching on and on and on and on, and they haven't really gotten the trial. So there's definitely been a reality check on it. And now what we're starting to see is, I think, this kind of general rescoping of what's going on in terms of what the trial will be. And then, so I predict that 2016 will be like the year of the real trials. And this year has been a little bit of kind of, like I said, getting our heads around the idea and turning it into reality.
Gotcha. Now, one of the things you kind of brought up already was, obviously there's this carrier grade mentality when it comes to the telecom operators. I mean, they've had this mentality for a long time. And again, they run these networks that are operating pretty efficiently for the most part today. And consumers have a certain expectation, and these networks do tend to work. And so this move towards software and virtualization is probably a little scary for a lot of these operators, because they do kind of have these certain requirements. I guess, how do you see this need for carrier grade, and how are you guys approaching the need that operators have for that certain service level quality that they come to expect, and obviously are going to want when it comes to this move for virtualization? Yeah,
I think it's got some very unique challenges. Virtualization is great technology in terms of things like cost consolidation and getting very high utilization out of a server. The problem lies in two kind of fronts. The first is that when you begin to design a particular piece of software to be made into a very specific piece of hardware, you take certain steps and you're able to kind of decide if you want to optimize a particular feature set in the software or the hardware. Once you move to virtualization, that entire aspect is gone. Now it's like you have to optimize everything in the software to a certain extent, and that becomes a massive challenge. I think virtualization itself doesn't lend itself particularly well to some of the aspects of carrier grade networking, which is why you start to see the emergence of some of these technologies, SRIOV and DPDK and things like that, to eliminate some of the factors like jitter and some of those capabilities. What we focus on is a little different. I mean, we're part of that, but the truth of the matter is what we're really focused on is providing the availability, which every show I go to, the major complaint is, how can I get reliability out of a hypervisor? And the truth is that you can get reliability out of a hypervisor if you're willing to wait a few seconds, or you're willing to wait a few minutes in some cases, where that's just not acceptable for some of these applications. And that's where we kind of come in, is we're able to execute a fully redundant failover mode, that's measured in milliseconds versus minutes in some cases. So that's a big leg up for us, and that's what people are looking for. So to get to that carrier grade, it's almost a little bit of a back to the future with technologies, because you have to start to implement some of the things that were done in the mainframe days in a virtualized way. So that's the first part of it. So that's been a big part.
Yeah, interesting. So, but you guys are able at this point really to have the technology in place to really allow these operators to be able to get that basically real time reliability through the hypervisor at this point. That's something that's pretty much available now for operators.
Yeah, so we're in a set of trials right now with some pretty large operators. And I think it was last week or the week before, I can't remember exactly, we actually put out our Etsy POC paper on this topic, which was sponsored by AT&T and NTT. So some pretty heavy hitters got behind and helped us deliver this new concept of how we deliver this within a hypervisor-based world. And what we were able to really show there is things like blackout and brownout times and how that works, and how quickly we can do a failover. So yeah, for certain, we're already there. And while we don't necessarily have a shippable product yet, we're definitely in the trial stage and evaluating this at some of the operators.
Gotcha. And it's got to be pretty nice to be able to have these operators, these large operators, who really seem like getting on board with this. I mean, obviously AT&T, like you mentioned, NTT is very big on this. Telefonica is big on this. SK Telecom is big on this. I mean, a lot of these big operators have been pushing this move towards virtualization for quite some time, and it's got to be good from a vendor community to have almost like a customer's already ready for this, as opposed to in the past it's always been you launch a product and hope somebody wants to buy it. Now it's like you're offering something that carriers want, and it's like it's just a matter of getting it to them in the right pieces at this point.
Yeah, I think the hardest part for us has been able to figure out who to work with, because we're out in Barcelona at Mobile World Congress, and we had listen to like 50 meetings, and
Yeah.
everybody was like, yeah, I need this. And the truth is that it's not, I wish I could sit here and say, hey, look, you can go download it today and anybody can set it up and use it. But there's two major challenges we have. The first is that every one of these environments is different, right?
Yep.
So there's no standardization whatsoever. So you really can't just kind of drop it in like any other piece of software. The second challenge is really that these are big projects. I mean, there's just no way around it. So Stratus is not is not a VMware size company or anything of that matter. So, we really have to kind of pick our battles, and we've been very fortunate to be able to find some partners and different operators who will work with us, who've been very interested in it, as well as very kind of understanding of how we can kind of fit this stuff in.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a good point, though. You're right. I mean, I'm sure you guys are very busy at these big shows, and obviously, like you're saying, people are very interested in this technology and want to get on board with it. So yeah, I'm sure for a company, obviously you guys are pretty good size, but again, not like one of the huge, biggest companies out there. So I'm sure it stretches your capabilities and your assets there quite a bit. So I'm sure those shows are pretty exciting for you guys. But
yeah. The other challenge is that there's so many different approaches to solving the problem, and
sure,
frankly, every customer is going to have to find their own route, and that's been a major thing for us. Is that there's different open source projects out there that kind of do something like we do, but may not offer the performance we provide, or they might not have necessarily have all the feature set. And then there's a whole ton of providers out there who are building the applications themselves, and they're going through a massive transformation of how they architect these things. Yeah. So a lot of the times when they're making those decisions, they're trying to build the resilience into the application, and that kind of gets you there, but it's also very high cost for the vendor. So on the ecosystem and vendor side of things, I think it's a little bit tough because even though there's the interest and people want to buy it, without the standardization and without kind of a general consensus on the right approach, there's a lot of different approaches going on, and each of them has their own pros and cons. I mean, we're not perfect, but certainly building it into the VNF is also not a perfect way to go either. So, you have to kind of do a lot of research, and that's what I find that a lot of like I said, that's what 2015 has been about. It's really been trying some things out and then doing the research to find the right solution, which again, is almost custom in every case.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I know on the show here we've had people from Etsy on, we've had OPNFV on, Open Daylight on, all these different organizations. And you're right. I mean, it does seem like they're trying to get to this standards thing, but there's so many different interests involved and so much different technology involved that it seems like for those guys, it's a big project. And you're right, carriers do seem like they are more comfortable when there are standards involved, because that's kind of what they're used to dealing with. So when there's not standards, it makes everybody a little bit nervous, and that's always a big challenge. It seems like right now, at least for this market, is just trying to get that standards part down.
Yeah, and there's some of it. Yeah,
it's getting exactly. Well, now, I mean, another thing I want to touch on a bit was, and it seems like with virtualization, the timing of it seems to kind of be coming along with the same wave as, there's a lot of talk about 5G now, there's a lot of talk about Internet of Things, all these different new kind of technologies and services are coming on board. I mean, do you see any sort of connection between virtualization and these new technologies? I mean, it seems like, with 5G, there's a lot of talk involved, at least with the initial, what the standards could be with that there will be virtualization as part of that. And obviously with IoT, with opening up these mobile networks to connecting just about anything in the world, you would think virtualization would be a prime, some sort of provisioning service or something would be great for that as well. I guess, is the timing of all this a good timing for everybody? I mean, is virtualization going to play a big part in these new kind of evolutions of technologies and services, do you think?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt. I think the timing's great because there's an opportunity for things to come together at the same time. And there's not like this notion that we're going to, something in the infrastructure will be designed not to support the future requirements. The other thing I think is quite fortuitous, quite fortuitous, but still a little bit chicken and egg at this point, is that by bringing in virtualization and starting to talk about these architectures, there's a little bit of, well, we should architect it this way, but wait, what about this other innovation that's so I think I think the dependencies there, I think a lot of the kind of high level stuff is figured out. Now we're getting into the details of these architectures. I think, notably OPNFV is really pushing very hard on certain aspects. We're part of that. And they're starting to get there. And I think what'll happen is there'll be a good balance in the end. In the long run, there'll be a good balance between the new feature sets required versus this being simply like like most virtualization in the enterprise, virtualization was really introduced independent of another burning platform. It would just save money on servers. This is more along the lines of, we're going to save money, of course, but we're also going to get the added benefit of positioning our architecture to be future reliable versus kind of having to try to graft it onto something old. So I think that's actually really good coming together. That said, virtualization itself, I kind of question what percentage of the populace in terms of the VNFs and the footprints will actually be used, because we're very keenly watching what's going on in the container space. Your Dockers and what Red Hat's doing, and and Canonical's doing with like LXC and LXD. So I mean, that to me is actually kind of almost equally as exciting, because virtualization gets you very far. But if you start to really go all down the path of what either a combination of virtualization or containers on bare metal can do for you, it's fairly compelling, even though it's still nascent right at this point. I mean, public clouds are using it, but enterprises haven't really jumped on board with containers quite yet. But I also think that's another theme for 2016. I think more and more of the new VNFs will be container based, and you'll get kind of far with that.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it is definitely an interesting time to be in this space right now. I mean, again, there's so many. It seems like it seems like we've been talking about it for a long time, but there's so much still needs to be done, and so many ways this can still go. That it is an interesting time to kind of be. I'm sure for you guys especially. I mean, you're deep into it. To kind of be in this space, it's got to be exciting, but also, the decision-making processes have got to be very. I'm sure keeping you up with that. I'm sure trying to make sure you make the right decisions and the right partners and stuff too.
It's not quite as hard as you think. I mean, because like I said, there's this kind of general rationalization of where to start. And what's really good is that the overall approach has been, let's start with one VNF, right? And generally it's like a firewall or a router, something they know really well, something the vendors already have products for. So the good news, I think the good news in some of this is that, we're still dealing with telecom operators who tend to be much more structured and predictable, and i.e. they take a little more time to get things done than some of the more bleeding edge enterprises. So if we were dealing with a bunch of startups in the consumer space, this would be very troubling. But for us, I think we picked a few partners. They've been pretty clear with us on what their goals and timelines are, and we've turned some away just for that reason. It's like, well, this isn't really the best fit for our technology, so let's start and be pragmatic. And so doesn't exactly always make the investors happy to hear that we're moving slow, but nonetheless, I mean, I think in the long run that'll be better for everybody.
Yeah, no, but it's good to talk to people who are deep inside of this though, because they do have obviously you have a very good a realistic view of what's happening out there. So that's kind of nice to get beyond some of the hype at times too. So it's good to have that too. But before we wrap up the conversation here, I guess maybe one final kind of topic, looking at as you look ahead, what are some of the bigger challenges that you see kind of facing this market right now? I mean, obviously, you kind of mentioned the standards issue. Obviously, that's going to be a big part that needs to be worked through at some point too. But I guess as you look at kind of the general market and of how you guys approach it, what's kind of the thing that's kind of keeping you guys busy in the labs and kind of keeping you guys most up late at nights and over the weekends working on the products? Sure.
I think the thing for me is that the general, as somebody who kind of spent a lot of his career in middleware prior to joining Stratus, there's definitely a movement. I think a VNF today is really a port job from the hardware world. So you think a firewall, right? Mm-hmm. So I have a firewall product. It's hardware, software combined. It's an appliance, and then I make my first round firewall VNF. I bring it to market by basically just kind of replicating the exact same concepts into a virtualized world, right? Mm-hmm. And what that basically enables you to have is a poor man's version of the original product, right? So, the performance isn't there, so all the complaints people are making about this particular space is that what really will open up the door is kind of what the next generation of a VNF will look like. And you're starting to see that from, we're just starting to work on a POC right now with Juniper, mm-hmm. and they're coming up with some new ideas on how they're kind of decomposing and making these VNFs much more service oriented, much like you see in the kind of Java world or even in some other technologies in the development space and what's going on with cloud. So these things are becoming more cloudy, and that is awesome because it will get over some of the hurdles long term of things like performance, because you're actually separating out the planes and so forth. It'll also solve a lot on availability, which helps us. So we're really excited about these developments. But at the same time, you go, well, what's the third generation VNF? Is it, this is second, what's the third, and what does that really mean? And that's where you start to see some of these other things creep in. So I think we're equally as excited about the future as we are concerned about it at times. And I just think that just goes part and parcel with being in a space where innovation is happening. So, I mean, so I think the architecture of the future of VNFs is probably comes right after the standards. And that architecture will ultimately be what kind of gets us over some of the classic challenges we've heard, such as performance and ultimately availability.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because I've talked to a lot of operators about this, and one of their concerns has always been, why should I go down this virtualization route if it's not going to provide any better performance than what I already have? I've got these products out there, they're already paid for, they're working, they work pretty well. Obviously, agility is always going to be a good part too. But if I go the virtualization route and it doesn't provide me any better agility at this point, why do it now? Why not wait, like you said, till version 2 or version 3 or whatever is really going to actually provide me with a bonus as opposed to just what I'm already doing? Because there's no point in doing what I'm doing now virtualized. If you give me better performance or less CapEx, OpEx, whatever it's going to be, that makes probably more sense for them.
Yeah, but I'll give you 2 examples, I think, that kind of counter that argument. I hear the argument, I get it, right? But the first one is that we have one of the people we're working with, their first attempt at doing this is this POC we're working on. They're going to go to trial next year. And what they're building is actually a product. They have a product already today that allows them to go out and attack enterprises of a certain size. So let's say they're attacking an enterprise consumer, might have 1,000, 5,000 employees or more. This new technology we're helping them try to solve and build the resilience around is allowing them to go after more SMB type of environments. A company like Stratus' size, which is like about 500 employees versus 1,000. So you're now able to take the same type of products and offerings you're making and go attack new markets that you couldn't attack before. Mm-hmm. To me, that's pretty compelling, right? So I think that's one use case we're starting to hear about more. Of course, the agility stuff you hear, but at the same time, that's kind of like, you can't really defend that with a CFO. So that one's tough. Sure. But the idea of being able to enter new markets and develop new products, I think, is very compelling. The other thing I think that is going to, I think you're right in the sense that outside of those areas, the next step is going to be what they're going to look at is automation, right? And yeah. What the truth is, everybody says that these projects are cloudy, but at the end of the day, they're not super cloudy, right? They're really more like virtualization and virtualization management concepts that have been around in the enterprise for years. What'll happen next is that they'll leapfrog and realize that, well, once I can get the automation, that cloud-like automation where things are just happening and they just work based upon load and performance and those types of aspects, that's when things really change, because then you're going to have a very hard CapEx and OpEx advantage. Virtualization is going to get you there just by eliminating hardware, but the next level will be the agility from the overall operational automation you're going to get, and that's going to be the big change. That'll be the game changer. But again, we're effectively 2 stair steps away from that, really, yeah. And that's going to take a while. So there of course will be early adopters like the vendors you mentioned, like AT&T, and then there'll be adopters that come along later that are going to be a lot more aligned. They're going to lag it behind a little.
Yeah. Interesting. We'll get great insight. Well, Jason, hey, we definitely appreciate the great insight on the topic today. Obviously, it sounds like you guys are very busy in the middle of this and we'll be busy for quite some time on this as well. But we definitely appreciate the insight. Hopefully, as you guys progress along the lines here too, we can catch up with you again and maybe get some more insight from you as well going forward. But we definitely appreciate the time and information, Jay. And hopefully you enjoy the rest of the beautiful day out there in Massachusetts and have a nice weekend as well. But thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Talk to you guys again soon. Well, great. Well, that'll do it for this week's NFV SDN Reality Check. Thanks for watching, and please make sure to check us out again next week. Thanks.
NFV SDN Reality Check with Dan Meyer is a production of RCR TV. To suggest show topics or to reach Dan, you can find him on email, dmeyer@rcrwireless.com, and on Twitter @Meyer_Dan. For more Dan, news on NFV SDN, and everything wireless, find your way over to rcrwireless.com.